Talking to God, Chapter 11. The room we rented was in the house of a fairly well-to-do merchant family. When they said we could have free room and board in exchange for work, they really meant work. It started at dawn when the mullah chanted the azan, the morning call to prayer. They had 5 children in this household, and the little ones started crying right then. At that point, I had to get up and start taking care of the children so that everyone else could sleep. The yard here was paved. It was all cement, and every day I had to scrub it spotlessly clean on my hands and knees with a brush and a pail of soapy water. Then I had to rinse it down. My prosthetic started to wear down from getting wet and then from my dragging it across the rough cement. The mother in the household squared away her domestic affairs by mid-morning and then went out. I don't know where. She left her children for me to watch, and those kids were oh so unruly, so naughty. There was nothing I could do with them. I didn't know how to control them. I was only 13 or so myself. If I so much as spoke a harsh word to them, much less scolded them, they complained to their mother when she came home, and then I got scolded or punished or deprived of food. The oldest of the 5 children in this family was a girl just about my age or a little younger. She was bigger than me because I am so short, but she was no older. That girl harassed me endlessly. She took great delight in bossing me around. I couldn't stand for someone my own age to lord it over me, giving me orders just to watch me obey. I hated taking those orders, but I did everything she asked, though I had difficulty holding my tongue. That girl found 1,000 ways to choke the spirit out of me. Sometimes she saw me busy with a job her mother had given me, and she ordered me to leave that job and do some piece of work for her. She put me in positions where I either had to disobey her or leave her mother's job undone. Either way, I would get in trouble. She always followed me around as I scrubbed the yard, saying, "You missed a spot. Get back here. You missed this spot." Then, when I had scrubbed that spot again and moved on, she would say, "No, that wasn't good enough. Get back here." When I finished a chore, she would come over and stare at me until I had to ask, what else should I do? She would hem and haw and finally think of something, and then watch me as I worked. She never did any work herself, and I wanted to shout, "All right, I'll do your job, but what are you staring at me for? Go away." Of course, we both knew why she was watching me like that. She was waiting for me to make a mistake, a chance for her to say, "Ah, you wretch, start over. Do it again." When she got tired of chastising me, she would go to the living room and turn on the television. After I finished every single job assigned to me, every last possible piece of work I could imagine around the house, I would go and watch television too, from the back of the room. But as soon as this girl noticed my presence, she would turn the television off so that I would go away. And then as soon as I left, I would hear her turn that TV on again. Sometimes her mother would cook something for us, but the girl always insisted on bringing it to us herself. "Oh, don't bother with that, Ika," she would say. "I'll take it to them." Ika is the word for mom, in the dialect these people spoke. Well, she would bring the food to our little room and dish out a little for us and throw the rest away. When her mother said, "Did you give them their food?" this girl would say, "Oh, yes, Ika, I gave them plenty, and they sure gobbled it up." I, of course, had to keep my mouth shut and contain my angry thoughts. It seems hard to imagine, but if I had complained, it would have made things even worse. Sometimes her mother would sit the 2 of us down and say, "Okay, girls, here are all these clothes. I want you to iron them together." She acted like we were companions, and that this would be a fun thing for us to do as a team. But as soon as the mother left, the girl would go watch television. Then just before her mother was due home, she'd come back and pretend she had been working all along. When her mother entered the room, she would launch into loud complaints about my laziness, about how I had not helped her, how she had been forced to do all this ironing by herself. And then her mother would warn me to improve my behavior if I wanted to stay on the premises. It made me indignant, but there was nothing I could do about it. I don't know what motivated this girl. For my mother's sake, I never said one complaining word to her or about her. My mother was sick, and if we got kicked out of this place, I didn't know where I could take her. My mother knew what was going on, though. She knew how this girl was ordering me around, slandering me and casting blame on me for things she herself had done wrong. But my mother kept telling me, "Bear it up. Let it go, daughter. Do as she tells you. Don't let it bother you." And so, because of my mother, I tolerated my situation. Much later, here in America, my friend Alice showed us a tape one night, a movie called Cinderella. In the middle of the tape, I started to cry. I thought I was crying for Cinderella, but looking back, I realized that I saw my own story in hers. That's why Cinderella affected me so sharply. I grew tired of life itself in that house. My prosthetic leg was wearing out. The foot had cracked and I could hardly walk on it anymore. Someone told my mother of a place in Quetta that made prosthetic limbs, so we went there one day. They had only ready-made prosthetics made of wood instead of plastic like mine. Wooden prosthetics are very heavy, and this shop had only big ones made for men, large men. The workers there said he could saw the foot off one of these large legs and glue it to the end of my prosthetic. I had no choice but to accept the solution, so I said yes. The foot he gave me was about 1.5 times the size of my real foot. It was a great big heavy thing too. He glued this man-sized foot onto my girl's prosthetic, and my mother and I headed home in a rickshaw. Near the house, we got out of the rickshaw and started to walk the final block. Suddenly the foot fell off. I tripped and fell right there in the street. My mother panicked. "Stay here," she shouted, as if I could go anywhere without my leg. And she ran to get us another rickshaw so we could return to the prosthetic shop. In her frantic haste, however, she left me just lying in the street. I looked up. A bus was coming. The driver didn't slow down. He assumed I was an able-bodied person who would get out of the way if I wanted to. I think he assumed I was lying there to give him needless trouble. I was trying to stand up, but I wasn't used to doing so with a footless prosthetic, and I fell over again and had to drag myself out of the way on my knees, pushing and pulling myself with my hands. The bus driver slowed down to curse me for making him slow down and then sped off. In the meantime, neighborhood children clustered around me, chattering. I felt humiliated. My mother came back with another rickshaw, and we returned to the prosthetic shop. The man admitted he had done a poor job, and he set about gluing the foot to my prosthetic more securely. As far as that went, he did a good job. I had a foot from then on, but it was heavy and ungainly and much larger than my other foot. Still, I had to make do, for it was better than no foot at all. My mother's asthma, meanwhile, kept getting worse. And with that girl constantly lording it over me, the whole world seemed to press down on my shoulders. Some days I thought I could not bear it. I thought, oh, this weight is too heavy for me, this weight. And all this time I brooded. In my heart I kept asking why all this was happening to me. When I came home from Germany and saw the pitiful state of Afghanistan, when I saw my people making war on one another every day, when I lost my family to the ravages of that war, I grew angry with God. Yes, angry with him. Why should I deny this? It's the truth. If God is there, I reasoned, if God is so nice like they say, if God is so powerful, if he can really do anything in the world, why is he doing this? In the Quran, it says that God is compassionate and all-forgiving. It says that God wants only the best for humanity. But how could I believe it? In fact, I was too distressed to pay much attention to believing in God. I was too beaten down by my hardships to worship him. Then one certain night, something happened. I wish I knew the date. For my own satisfaction, I wish I knew. But I was not paying attention to the calendar, since one day felt so much like the next. I just know that one night, after the rest of the family had gone to bed, I went outside into the cement yard, which was still moist from the scrubbing I had given it that day. My problems were boiling in my heart. My ailing mother, my hurting legs, my eroding prosthetic. This girl who endlessly tormented me had gone to bed, but her voice kept shrilling in my head, shouting orders. All these things buzzed inside me like hornets released from a hive. I looked up at the stars, those same stars I had gazed upon with so much wonder when I was in second grade. And then somehow, That long-forgotten sense of wonder came upon me again. I felt myself drawn up into all that space. I surrendered my will. I just let it happen. With my face turned up to the night sky, I spoke directly to God, spoke to Him from my heart. I said, enough. Oh, my dear God, get me out of this. God, darling, forgive me. I can't hold up all this weight for myself anymore. Please. I'll hold up most of it, but you hold on some of it. Whatever I've done wrong in the past, I can't change that now. Between you and me, let's say that's what's done is done. All I can do now about the past is ask you to forgive me. I plead with you. All I can do is promise to be good, to remember you from now on always. I relinquish all of myself to you. No more resistance. Please, God, help me. I can't hold up this weight anymore. That's what I said in my heart. In fact, that's what I screamed, but not out loud. I spoke it just in my heart, only in my heart. I didn't make a sound. I was alone, but if anybody had been watching me at that moment, they would have seen nothing but that same little mouse of a Pharaoh as always, standing quietly in the yard. Nonetheless, something was happening, something big. For the first time, truly and totally, I was surrendering to Allah. And with that surrender, a change began. I felt it in that moment. I felt it ever increasingly in the days that followed. What was this change? My attention turned towards God, and the more I attended to God, the more I discovered how to be patient and tolerant and how to relax. When that girl snapped her orders at me, I let it wash away. I let it go. I absorbed none of her spite and hatred, and so she failed to plant any seeds of bitterness inside me. Negativity stopped sprouting in my heart. I grew so calm, so serene, that even the girl who was bossing me around noticed the change and eased up on me. After that, every day and every night, I said namaz at all the prescribed times. When the mullah chanted the azan in the morning, I got up, washed myself, and said a full set of prayers before anyone else in the household woke up. Throughout the day, when the call to prayer sounded, I stopped whatever I was doing, found a quiet spot, and turned my face to Mecca. No one dared tell me to stop performing the holy rituals and go back to doing household errands. Strangely enough, whenever I was absorbed in solitary prayer, I felt I had company. I felt somebody's presence and tenderness embracing me. I began to perform more than the 5 required prayers. Late at night, I went out into the darkest hour, 2 or 3 a.m., with my precious Quran in hand. I performed namaz, and then afterward, looking up at the stars, I talked to God. So many stars were shining up there in the darkness, shining down on me. I remembered the wonderful things my second-grade teacher had told me about the sky being so large and the stars being bigger than Earth and looking only small because they were so inconceivably far away. And in those moments, the grandeur of the universe exalted me, and I felt the power of God. And yes, I felt His nearness too, and I had no trouble confessing my troubles to Him as intimately as I might to a loving friend. I silently said, Allah dear, my mother is suffering so. When will she be released from her hardships? I said, God dear, this leg of mine is wearing away. When it's gone, what will I do? Without my leg, I'm hardly even a person. I can't even get my own self to the bathroom. When my prosthetic is gone, what am I going to do? No sooner had I posed such questions in my heart than I felt a warmth glowing and growing from the middle of me, and I knew that God was listening to me, that God was nearby, very close indeed, an invisible light, a bodiless friend, a smiling power. I had such a strong and positive feeling about God being there. One night, looking up at the heavens, I saw a single star detach itself from the light-studded dome and streak across the night sky. Then it was gone, but I knew that star meant something. And indeed, a few days later, I woke up one morning to hear the news. 1,000 Afghan refugees were to be rescued from Pakistan and taken to America. My heart spoke again. This come from God, it said. My mother and I will be among the 1,000. Thank you, God. I knew that in His compassion, Allah had decided to save me from this place, and that made me feel so calm and wonderful.